Good day to you, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me. My name is Peter Griffith. I lead NASA's Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems Office at Goddard Space Flight Center, and I'd like to talk to you today about NASA's Arctic-Boreal vulnerability experiment. But first, I would like to begin by acknowledging that the circumpolar Arctic is the home to many different indigenous peoples. We are reminded of their deep connection to this region and our role as researchers to work towards reconciliation with our indigenous partners. Wherever you may be participating in the 2020 AGU Fall Meeting, please join me in honoring the place-based knowledge of indigenous peoples and recognizing their ancestral and contemporary stewardship of their homelands. So, the Arctic-Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, or ABOVE, is a large-scale study of environmental change in the Arctic and boreal regions of Western North America and the implications of these changes for ecological systems and society. And we're doing this, as NASA does, with a strategy that spans spatial scales from leaf to orbit. During the course of this 10-year field campaign, we are making observations at plot, tower, airborne, and orbital scales and feeding this data into a number of different modeling frameworks. And our overall science question is, how vulnerable or resilient are ecosystems and society to environmental change in this region of the world? And we are investigating the underlying processes and the interactions that control vulnerability of resilience in this region, and to assess how people within and beyond the region may respond to changes in these processes and interactions. Now, one of the major drivers of change in this region is the rapid warming that it is experiencing due to carbon emissions from human activities all over the world, mostly in areas outside the region itself. The normal temperatures are the average over a 30-year baseline period from 1951 to 1980. These higher than normal temperatures are shown in red, and lower than normal temperatures are shown in blue. This frame represents the 5-year global temperature anomalies from 2015 to 2019. As you can see, this area is at least 2 degrees Celsius above normal. But it's worse than that. Yesterday, for instance, the temperature across the entire 20 million square kilometers of the Arctic was 10 degrees C above the average. Now, there are a lot of things that are impacted by these warming temperatures. Among this is permafrost, which is circumpolar. It's thick, in some places hundreds of meters. It contains a lot of old slow carbon, vegetation primarily that has been frozen for tens of thousands of years. But it's not so permanent anymore. It's thawing and decaying and releasing CO2 or methane, and it's changing the very ground that plants and animals live on. And we see these warmer temperatures causing changes in vegetation, for instance. This greening and browning trend is derived from Landsat data that dates as far back as 1984, so this is a multi-decadal trend. And because of the rapid warming, we see areas of increased vegetation growth, shown here as greening, and decreased vegetation growth, shown here as browning. These remote sensing results are being verified by on-the-ground observations. So what do we see when we look on the ground? We see areas like this, a retrogressive permafrost thaw on the Peel Plateau of the Northwest Territories, this shot from 2015 by Scott Zolkos of the Woodwell Climate Institute, shows an area of permafrost thawing and approaching this lake, which it subsequently drained. So you can see an area here where the ground will show a browning trend because of this thaw in the lake drainage. And we also see areas like this, photographed by Bruce Cook from Goddard Space Flight Center. Here we see spruce bark beetle damage in Alaska, as seen from the airborne campaign that Bruce and his collaborators have been conducting in collaboration with the Forest Service. Now, some of the areas you see are brown because of spruce tree death, but you could particularly see on the slopes of the hillside here, areas where what was once tundra is now being encroached upon by shrubs, and this creates some of the greening trends. One of the things that's happening across this region is an increase in fire frequency and severity. I took this photo out the window of a twin otter on the way from Yellowknife to Daring Lake in 2014, when a total of 2.9 million hectares burned in Canada's Northwest Territories. That's an area larger than Maryland, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island put together. Next, you'll hear from Dr. Liz Hoy about a synthesis of field data and fire weather data across the boreal forests of Canada and Alaska.
Thanks, Dr. Griffith. This study, led by Dr. Xanthi Walker at Northern Arizona University, was a collaborative effort by many scientists from the above campaign. We wanted to understand what was driving carbon emissions from wildfire across the boreal forests of Alaska and northwestern Canada. As Dr. Griffith mentioned, this region is seeing an increase in fire frequency and severity, but identifying what is driving these changes is difficult. Fire emissions impact air quality, and these emissions represent a key interaction between the ecosystem and the atmosphere. We used 417 field sites located across 6 ecoregions of the northwestern boreal forest in our analysis. You can see the locations of the sites and ecoregions in the map on the screen. The inset shows the total burned area across these ecoregions over the last few decades, and you can see that the burned area has been increasing during this time. What we found was that it was the available fuel at a site that drove the carbon emissions, not the fire weather. This showed us that it is important to understand the topography, fine-scale drainage conditions, and even forest type when modeling carbon emissions, and that these bottom-up factors should be given more importance when predicting carbon emissions than top-down drivers such as climate and weather. This can be seen in the graphic at the left, where rockets represent carbon stored in wood, trees, and soil in the 4 main boreal forest regions we studied. Though fire weather helps ignite the rockets, the amount of emissions each forest can produce is determined by the fuel load, including soil layers, and flammability, including the soil moisture. For example, the birch rocket is very small, representing a smaller amount of emissions, even though this forest might be the first to burn. The wet spruce site will take longer to burn, but once it does burn, it has the largest amount of carbon emissions, partially due to the thick organic soil at these sites. The pictures at the right show examples of an unburned spruce forest with thick organic soils and dense vegetation, and a burned site where the trees and soil layer have been decimated by fire.
And all of this matters because what happens up north doesn't stay up north. A personal favorite example of mine of the hemispheric scale of connections between the Arctic and my personal backyard are bird migrations. Something on the order of 3 to 5 billion birds, adults and their newly fledged young, fly from the boreal forest across the rest of the Americas every year. I'm now joined by Dr. Gil Boerer, one of the authors of an important new publication, Ecological Insights from 3 Decades of Animal Movement Tracking Across a Changing Arctic. Take it away, Gil.
Collaboration with hundreds of researchers from around the world, we compiled the Arctic Animal Movement Archive. The archive collects the location from animal-borne tags like the collar you see here on the fox or the backpack you see here on the gyrfalcon of thousands of individuals. We have about more than 15 million records starting from the late 80s until current of almost 100 species. It contains information about where animals have been at any point in time throughout the Arctic and can be analyzed to understand the response of animals to the quickly changing conditions in the Arctic, and it can provide a baseline to understand animal movement at previous recent decades, currently, and in the future. Archive is providing a ground-based dataset that can be matched with remote sensing dataset of the conditions in the Arctic. For example, in this animation, you see the seasonal movement stripped from the year, just the month of year, of many different groups of animals moving throughout North America in conjunction with the vegetation, greenness, snow, and sea ice. We analyzed several test cases to show the power of data analysis with the archive. For example, golden eagle migrating along the Pacific West Coast have changed their migration date by about half a day per year. Caribou in northern Canada have changed the dates at which they are producing cubs, and different populations change them in different extents. Other studies show animal response to increased temperature. We know that herbivores are migrating, are moving more and having a harder time to forage for food for every warming of 1 degree, whereas predators having an easier time to do that.
Thank you, Gil, and thank you all for joining us today. I wish you all well in the coming months and hope we meet again in person at the 2021 AGU Fall Meeting in New Orleans, Louisiana.